The Danelaw. When Vikings and Saxons built a New England, Alfred's victory at the Battle of Edington changed the course of history, but it did not mark the end of the Viking presence in England. Quite the opposite. For the first time, two peoples who had spent decades at war had to learn to share the same land. The agreement reached between Alfred and Guthrum did not drive the Scandinavians off the island. Instead, it established a new political reality. England would be divided. To the south, Wessex would remain under Alfred's rule. To the north and east, vast regions would remain under Viking control. Thus was born one of the most fascinating areas of medieval Europe, the Danelaw. The name literally meant the land of Danish law. Although the Anglo-Saxons generally referred to the invaders as Danes, many of them had also come from Norway and other parts of Scandinavia. What truly defined the Danelaw was not the exact origin of its inhabitants, but the fact that they followed customs, traditions, and legal systems different from those practiced in Wessex. For the first time, a large part of England was governed according to Scandinavian laws. For Alfred, that agreement represented a practical solution. His kingdom needed time to recover. After years of invasions, towns had been destroyed, fields lay abandoned, and thousands of families had lost everything. Continuing an endless war would have jeopardized the very survival of Wessex. Guthrum also understood the advantages of peace. After his defeat at Edington, he realized that conquering the entire English territory would be far more difficult than he had imagined. Rather than persisting in endless campaigns, he decided to consolidate his rule over the lands he already controlled. He thus established himself as the ruler of East Anglia. Even after accepting Christian baptism, Guthrum remained a leader deeply rooted in Scandinavian traditions. His reign marked the beginning of a new phase, in which former warriors began administering cities, collecting taxes, resolving legal disputes, and encouraging trade. The image of the Vikings was beginning to change. They evolved from being merely feared seafarers into administrators, farmers, traders, and craftspeople. Meanwhile, important cities flourished under Scandinavian influence. The largest of these was Jórvik, the name the Vikings gave to the ancient city of York. Strategically situated between rivers and trade routes, Jórvik quickly became one of the wealthiest urban centers in northern Europe. Ships constantly arrived, bringing goods from Scandinavia, Ireland, Frisia, the Baltic Sea, and even regions linked to the Islamic world via major trade routes. In Jórvik's markets, one could find bear furs, Baltic amber, fine textiles, wine, pottery, silver jewelry, finely crafted weapons, glass, spices, and coins from extremely distant lands. It was a vibrant city. Its narrow streets were filled with blacksmiths, carpenters, goldsmiths, leather tanners, shipbuilders, and merchants of diverse backgrounds. Scandinavians and Anglo-Saxons worked side by side. Trade brought together peoples who, just a few years earlier, had stood on opposite sides of the battlefield. Other cities also rose to great importance. Lincoln, known to the Vikings as Lincoln, became a key administrative and commercial hub. Leicester expanded its markets. Derby became a center for agricultural and artisanal production. Nottingham, once the scene of clashes between Saxons and Vikings, came to play a pivotal role in controlling overland routes. These cities were part of a group later known as the Five Boroughs, urban centers that would play a decisive role in the history of medieval England. But the greatest difference between Wessex and the Danelaw lay not merely in the towns. It lay in the way justice was administered. The Vikings possessed a legal system that was quite advanced for its time. Important decisions were made at assemblies known as things, gatherings, where free men could present disputes, testimony, and arguments before the community. Contrary to the image of a people driven solely by force, many conflicts were resolved through negotiation, financial compensation, and public agreements. Laws established fines for various crimes. They also defined rules regarding inheritance, property, trade, and the resolution of family disputes. Honor remained a fundamental value. Yet community stability increasingly depended on the enforcement of laws. This legal tradition would profoundly influence the development of English institutions in the centuries to follow. Meanwhile, Alfred kept a close watch on events beyond his borders. He knew the peace might be short-lived. He therefore used those years to strengthen Wessex. He ordered the restoration of ruined towns. He rebuilt walls. He organized new fortifications. He improved roads. He established an efficient communication system linking major urban centers. Every decision was calculated to prevent future invasions from catching his kingdom off guard, as had happened years before. Across the border, life moved at a pace entirely different from that of military campaigns. Viking families cultivated wheat, barley, and oats. They raised cattle, sheep, and horses. They built farms using Scandinavian techniques adapted to the English climate. Swords gave way to plows. Shields were replaced by agricultural tools. Many of the men who had taken part in the invasion were now far more concerned with upcoming harvests than with new battles. It was a quiet transformation. Without realizing it, the English and the Scandinavians were beginning to build an entirely new society together. A society where two peoples, two cultures, and two traditions were slowly learning to coexist. But this coexistence would also bring profound changes. Language would begin to change, customs would blend, religions would meet, and a new identity would begin to emerge. In the next chapter of this story, we will step into the homes, markets, workshops, and farms of the Danelaw to discover what daily life was like for those who transformed former battlefields into thriving communities. There, far from the wars, the Vikings would leave a legacy far greater than any military conquest. For many years, the word Viking conjured up images of warships, raids, and bloody battles. Yet, within the Danelaw, a new reality was beginning to emerge. Far from the battlefield, thousands of Scandinavians were building lives vastly different from the ones they had led before crossing the North Sea. The former warriors were now farmers, traders, craftspeople, and family men. The conquered lands needed to be cultivated, towns needed to grow, children needed a future. Thus, little by little, England witnessed the birth of a society where Saxons and Scandinavians learned to live side by side. Viking villages were simple yet highly functional. At the heart of each community stood a longhouse, a large wooden structure that housed an extended family. Unlike modern homes, people and animals often shared the same building during harsh winters, utilizing the heat generated by the livestock to warm the living space. The walls were constructed of wattle and daub. Roofs were thatched with thick straw or covered with wood. Inside, a fire burned almost constantly. Beyond cooking food, the central hearth illuminated the home, warmed the inhabitants, and served as a gathering place for storytelling after sunset. It was around this fire that ancient sagas were passed down. Fathers taught their children the tales of Odin, Thor, and Freya. Elders recounted voyages across the North Sea, expeditions to Iceland and Ireland, and even rumors of lands even further afield. This is how the memory of the Norse peoples endured across generations. Yet, not everyone remained faithful to the old gods. Following the Treaty of Wedmore and the baptism of Guthrum, Christianity began to gain ground among the Scandinavian communities settled in England. Conversion, however, was a slow process. For decades, many Vikings maintained traditional religious practices while attending Christian churches. In some regions, Christian crosses coexisted with Thor's hammer amulets. It was a period of profound cultural transformation. In the fields, work followed the rhythm of the seasons. In the spring, men and women prepared the land for planting. In the summer, they tended to crops of wheat, barley, oats, and rye. In the autumn, they harvested the crops and stored enough food to last through the winter. In addition to farming, they raised oxen, horses, pigs, goats, and sheep. Fishing remained an important activity. English rivers offered salmon, trout, and eels, while the coast provided cod, herring, and other fish that could be salted for preservation. Their diet was simple, yet varied. Bread made from barley or wheat was eaten daily. Hearty soups combined vegetables, meat, and herbs. Cheese, butter, and milk were staples of their daily diet. Honey was used both as a sweetener and to produce mead, one of the beverages most prized by the Scandinavians. Meanwhile, the towns of the Danelaw were flourishing. Jórvik was becoming one of Northern Europe's major trading hubs. Its streets bustled with activity from the early hours of the morning. Merchants arrived bringing goods from very distant lands. Furs, amber, and walrus ivory came from the north. Fine fabrics, wine, and pottery arrived from the European mainland. Through major trade routes linked to Eastern European rivers, Products from the Islamic world also reached English markets. Silver coins minted in Baghdad have been found in ancient Viking settlements, demonstrating the extraordinary reach of these trade networks. Craftsmen held a position of great prestige. Blacksmiths produced swords, axes, agricultural tools, and horseshoes. Goldsmiths created richly decorated necklaces, bracelets, and brooches. Carpenters built ships, furniture, and houses. Tanners turned hides into clothing, boots, and equipment. Each trade played a vital role in the local economy. Women also performed important roles. In addition to managing the household, many oversaw properties during their husbands' long journeys. Some actively participated in trade. Others mastered highly sophisticated weaving techniques, producing garments sold across various regions of England. Although society remained predominantly male-dominated in military and political matters, Scandinavian women often enjoyed greater autonomy than many of their contemporaries elsewhere in Europe. Meanwhile, a quiet phenomenon began to transform the English language itself. Daily interaction led to the incorporation of Scandinavian words into the local vocabulary. Terms related to everyday life, trade, navigation, and rural activities passed from one culture to the other almost naturally. To this day, modern English preserves hundreds of words of Norse origin. The names of various English towns themselves reveal this heritage. Places ending in "by," a Norse word for village or settlement, such as Grimsby, Derby, and Whitby, originated during this period. Other locations ending in Thorpe or Thwaite also bear deep traces of Scandinavian settlement. The influence extended even to political organization. Assemblies known as things continued to bring free men together to settle disputes, ratify trade agreements, and discuss community issues. These gatherings fostered local participation and contributed to relatively stable governance. Over the decades, many marriages united Saxon and Scandinavian families. Children grew up hearing two different languages. They learned Christian traditions while remaining familiar with ancient tales of Norse mythology. The differences that once separated invaders from locals were slowly beginning to fade. A new generation was emerging, a generation that no longer saw itself as solely Saxon or solely Viking. It was a population shaped by the meeting of two cultures. Meanwhile, as the Danelaw flourished, Alfred remained vigilant. He knew that such peace was unlikely to last. Across the North Sea, new kings were consolidating their power. Denmark was growing stronger. Norway was moving toward unification. Trade routes were increasingly enriching Scandinavian rulers. Sooner or later, another great fleet would cross those waters. And when that moment arrived, England would need to be prepared. In the next chapter, we will see how Alfred transformed Wessex into the most efficient defense machine in Western Europe, and how, decades later, a new generation of Viking conquerors would turn their eyes toward England, initiating one of the most ambitious phases of the Viking Age. As the Danelaw flourished and coexistence between Saxons and Scandinavians became increasingly common, King Alfred knew that the peace won at Edington was merely a pause in a much larger story. He knew his opponents. He knew the Vikings were extraordinary navigators, skilled traders, and tenacious warriors. If a new generation of leaders decided to attack England, the mistakes of the past could not be repeated. Thus, Alfred initiated an unprecedented transformation in Wessex. His goal was not simply to win the next war, it was to ensure the kingdom was prepared to endure for generations to come. The first major change took place in the towns. For decades, many English communities had remained virtually defenseless. When a Viking army appeared on the horizon, inhabitants would flee to forests or monasteries, leaving their homes and farms behind. Alfred decided to completely change this reality. He ordered the construction and reconstruction of dozens of fortified towns known as burhs. These strongholds were strategically distributed throughout the kingdom. Each featured sturdy walls, fortified gates, and enough space to shelter the population from surrounding areas. In the event of an invasion, farmers, artisans, and merchants could quickly take refuge within these walls, while the army organized the defense. Beyond protecting the people, the burhs served another important function. They were connected by carefully planned roads. Messengers could travel rapidly between the strongholds, carrying news of enemy movements. For the first time, Wessex possessed an integrated defense system, but Alfred knew that walls alone would not win future wars. He also completely overhauled the army. In the past, when a threat arose, virtually all men were called up at once. This created a massive problem. While they were fighting, no one was tending the fields. As the months went by, there was a shortage of food to sustain both the population and the soldiers. To address this difficulty, Alfred created a system of rotating military service. Half of the men remained to protect the kingdom. The other half continued working in agriculture. After a certain period, the groups would swap roles. In this way, Wessex could maintain ready troops for practically the entire year without compromising its economy. It was an extraordinary innovation for the time. Another of the king's concerns was the sea. Viking longships remained one of the invaders' greatest advantages. Their speed allowed for surprise attacks at practically any point along the coast. To face this challenge, Alfred encouraged the construction of a permanent fleet. The new Saxon vessels were larger than many Viking ships and adapted to the conditions of English rivers and coastlines. Although initial results were modest, many historians consider these initiatives the first step toward what would, centuries later, become the powerful English Royal Navy. Meanwhile, perhaps Alfred's most important reform did not take place on the battlefield. It happened in schools. The king believed that an ignorant people could never build a strong kingdom. During the Viking invasions, countless monasteries had been destroyed. Libraries vanished. Books were burned. Many scholars died or left their communities. Concerned by this situation, Alfred launched a broad program to revive knowledge. He invited scholars from different regions of Europe to work at his court. He sponsored the translation of important works from Latin into Old English. He encouraged young nobles to learn reading, writing, and administration. His goal was to train rulers capable not only of fighting, but also of governing the kingdom wisely. Thanks to these initiatives, a large part of Anglo-Saxon intellectual output survived into the centuries that followed. While Alfred was strengthening Wessex, profound changes were taking place on the other side of the North Sea. In Denmark, former regional chieftains were beginning to unite their territories under increasingly powerful kings. In Norway, the process of unification was also advancing. The wealth gained through international trade grew year by year. Scandinavian ships sailed as far as Byzantium. Others traversed the rivers of Eastern Europe, heading toward the Black and Caspian Seas. Viking merchants traded with Arab, Slavic, Frankish, and Byzantine peoples. The Scandinavian world had never been so wealthy, and wealth meant power. This growth allowed new generations of rulers to dream of even greater ambitions. Small-scale raiding expeditions were a thing of the past. Now, some kings aspired to conquer entire countries. Among these leaders, a name began to emerge, one that would once again change the history of England. Sweyn Forkbeard, the son of King Harold Bluetooth. Sweyn grew up in a Scandinavia vastly different from the one known to Ragnar Lothbrok or the early raiders of Lindisfarne. The kingdoms were more organized, armies were larger, fleets numbered in the hundreds of vessels. The experience gained over more than a century of military campaigns had transformed the Scandinavians into one of Europe's major powers. Meanwhile, in England, many believed the peace won by Alfred would last forever. But history rarely stands still. After Alfred's death, his successors continued to strengthen the kingdom. They gradually reclaimed territories from the Danelaw. Some towns returned to Saxon rule, others remained under Scandinavian influence. Even so, the tension never fully vanished. Across the sea, Sweyn watched closely. He knew of England's riches. He knew its towns were prosperous. Its monasteries continued to amass treasures.
Claim
its
what
lands
is ours.
were fertile, and its kings still faced challenges in keeping the entire island unified. The opportunity seemed perfect. A new generation of ships would soon begin crossing the North Sea. But this time, the invaders would not seek merely gold. They would covet a crown. The next chapter will show how Sweyn Forkbeard launched a new era of invasions, conquering England and paving the way for his son, Cnut the Great, the man who would build an empire capable of uniting Denmark, England, Norway, and part of Sweden under a single ruler.
A new era
the Viking
begins.
Age was about to reach the height of its power, and the world would never be the same.